Hello, everyone, and welcome. Thank you so much for joining us for today's PeerUp session. I'm so thrilled to have everyone here. So, for those of you who are new to PeerUp, this is a student-led initiative which is dedicated to bridging the gap between high school challenges and professional reality. We connect you with amazing alumni and industry professionals to have meaningful real world discussions exactly like the one we have planned today. So, just some guidelines before we get started. Please help us minimize distractions by staying on mute and keeping your video off throughout the session. We highly encourage you to participate, so feel free to drop your questions into the chat box at any time. We'll be gathering them for the Q&A segment towards the end. Finally, the session is being recorded and will be shared on our YouTube channel and our website. You can find all past sessions and information at peer-up.org. So now on to our speaker, Akshara. Akshara is a high school student who is deeply passionate about science research, healthcare, and student leadership. She is actively involved in HOSA, and TSA, where she is placed both state and national levels. She is also very passionate about medical volunteering and is currently working at a family medicine clinic and has helped build her school's HOSA chapter with 5 international qualifiers. So, throughout her journey, Akshara has developed strong skills in cold calling, networking, and professional outreach, which are skills she'll share with you today. So, today she'll be covering 5 key topics: science research, HOSA, TSA, cold calling and communication, and medical volunteering. So, off to you, Akshara.
Yeah, so I'm just going to start with talking a little bit about myself. I am a sophomore at Eastlake High School, and I've been really passionate about things that have been mentioned for the past 2 years of my high school journey. And a big thing that I found is that with early success in these activities, a huge skill is persistence, and that's something that's applied a lot. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about experiences that have really shaped my high school experience. And please feel free to drop any questions in the chat about these topics. So, just starting with HOSA first. This year I founded Evergreen Middle School HOSA, and we recruited over 30 members, and we've organized healthcare speakers and mentorship programs with other high schools being brought in. And that chapter got 12 students who placed at the top in the top 10 at the Washington HOSA State Conference, and as well as 5 students qualifying to the International Leadership Conference. In addition, I've personally mentored 11 Eastlake HOSA competitors, and these mentees, 4 of them placed at the in high school level, top 10 at state, and then one has qualified to internationals. And personally, within HOSA, I compete in 3 events: healthy living, epidemiology, and research poster. I placed second at the 2025 WAHOSA State Leadership Conference last year, and then third at the HOSA International Leadership Conference for that event last year. In addition, service is a huge part of HOSA as well, and I earned the bronze Barbara James HOSA Service Award for 100 plus clinical hours. And HOSA is classified under a branch called CTSOs, Career and Technical Student Organizations. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit about how to find success in HOSA, as well as what you can do outside of competitions in HOSA throughout today. Moving on to TSA, I've done similar work in TSA. I co-founded and I served as the co-president of Inglewood Middle School TSA. It's recruited over 15 members, and it's been one of the first middle school TSA chapters in LWSD. I compete in technology problem solving, STEM mass media, future tech teacher, and biotechnology design at the Washington TSA state conferences, as well as the National TSA conference. I placed first at the 2025 Washington TSA state conference last year for technology problem solving, and then seventh at nationals. And once again, TSA is also classified as a career technical student organization. So HOSA and TSA are very similar. One is more oriented towards medicine, and the other one is more oriented towards engineering technology. But they both you build such great skills in both organizations, and I'll talk a little bit today about how you find success in both of these. And moving on, another huge thing I'm part of is medical volunteering and shadowing. Personally, I'm really interested in going down the pre-med pathway and into medical school. So it's really important to me that I get that clinical experience early on. Last year, I volunteered at a pediatric clinic over at Issaquah, and I learned a lot of great skills just with patient interaction as well as being able to be around healthcare professionals. And this year, I shadow and volunteer at Lake Hills Medical Associates, and I support patient care and clinical workflows a lot. And I assist with a variety of things. They give me a lot of freedom there. And it's been a really, really great experience into understanding whether or not this is a career field that you want to go into. And if it is, it's a great clinical experience that will help you further down the line. So, and I will be going a lot more into this as well and how to get these opportunities because, again, there are like restricting factors in high school that can prevent students from getting these opportunities, but there's always a way to overcome them. And I'm just going to talk a little bit about that. And finally, just a really big thing for me as well is science research. So, science research has been something that has been a way for me to explore my passions within science that you might not find traditionally in a classroom or another organization organized competition. You can explore any topic you want, do work that potentially will have real impact on that field. And this year, my research is focused on mRNA immunotherapies for triple negative breast cancer, and I received the opportunity to present my research at the American Association of Cancer Research for Cancer Research, the annual meeting in San Diego in April, and I was also accepted to present at the IEEE International Conference on Healthcare Informatics in Minnesota in June, and I've been accepted for publication in IEEE Explore with the conference proceedings. And presenting at research conferences is such a great opportunity, and I'll talk a little bit more about how to get those opportunities as well, because it can seem very daunting initially for someone in high school or middle school as to how to reach these. And the big thing that I do is science fair. It's a great opportunity for high school and middle school students, and even elementary school students to get involved with science research, present to judges who are in the industry, and it's just you build so many public speaking skills, you build confidence with your presentation, being able to present for yourself. And I placed first at the Washington State Science and Engineering Fair in biochemistry, and I also won a special award for best interdisciplinary research, and as well as other awards within science research. And it's this field has just given me so much to look forward to, and it's given me so many opportunities. And I want to make sure you guys understand how to get those opportunities and how to access them. So, yeah, a big skill, as I mentioned, throughout all of these things is persistence, and that's something I'm here to talk about. So I will let them take it away.
Um, so to start off, I think a lot of students here are still figuring out what direction they actually want to go in, especially in high school when everything feels like a trial and error. So what is one thing you wish you started earlier in high school?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that the biggest thing I want to focus on with this question is science research. So, I talked a lot about my project this year, which is heavily in computational biology. It's kind of where I'm looking to go. But in my freshman year of high school last year, I kind of picked a safer topic in public health, and it didn't really give me a lot of skills that I could have used in research later on. So, I think the biggest thing is don't put off learning those skills. You want to start anything you want to get into, start building the foundation early. Don't just pick the easy way out. And yeah, I think the biggest thing is I wish I was a bit more proactive with that freshman year.
A lot of students also try to do a lot just to look good on applications, but it doesn't always end up being meaningful. And what is one big mistake that students often make when trying to build their resume?
Yeah, so this is a huge thing I see in my peers, freshmen who are coming into high school and like middle school students coming into high school. They will, and I also initially made this mistake before high school. You're joining a lot of clubs without real direction. So I think that's great when you're trying to figure out what it is that you want to go into. You're not sure engineering, law, finance and you're not sure what direction you're going in, joining a lot of clubs can be a great opportunity to understand where you want to go. But once you have that understanding, there is no reason for you to be doing 10 or 15 different activities that don't show purpose in what you're doing. Quality over quantity is something I said a lot, but it is genuine to the high school experience. Everything on your resume should be something you're genuinely passionate about, and there really shouldn't be anything that is filler. Resume filler honestly weakens a resume rather than strengthens it because it doesn't add to the narrative that you're building with everything that you're involved in.
Thank you. So now we'll go more into like your experience with science research. Science research sounds really intimidating to a lot of high school students because they don't know what the first steps looks like. So could you walk us through what science research looks like for a high school student and how you got started with it?
Yeah, so science research can look like a big like position in a lab. We're like mixing chemicals, doing a lot of things in the lab, but there's so much more to it. And I think the biggest thing you should focus on is computational. So, coding and computational discovery is something that is accessible to high school students. You know, it's software right on your own laptop and open data sets online that can really help you still do something that's meaningful to the field, even if you don't have access to a laboratory environment. So, initially, I would say the biggest thing you want to get involved in is science fair because science fair is a great opportunity for you to present your research and it gives you kind of like an end goal as to like this is where I'm going. And so for our region, CERSAF, the Central Sound Regional Science and Engineering Fair, is in March, and so also with the Washington State Science and Engineering Fair, and these are kind of the biggest fairs that you're accumulating to. So you're going to be doing your research from around the summer area to February, and to get into research, really, the first thing you want to do is start reading papers. So when you're reading lots of literature, you are learning more about the field, and you're able to identify gaps within the field. So I'll take my own project, for example. I was super interested in mRNA immunotherapies. I already knew that. So I was looking into reading papers around this field and trying to identify what has not been studied yet, what has gaps in it. And that's where I came across triple negative breast cancer and how immunotherapies are upwards of $100,000. Triple negative breast cancer targets those in low income neighborhoods. How can you optimize immunotherapies so they're more accessible to people in low income areas? So that was the gap that I identified, and that's what my research was focused on. So the biggest thing that you should start with is reading papers, identifying the gap, looking at some of the methods that these papers are applying, and seeing how you can apply those methods in a computational aspect, especially because you probably don't have lab access. And there are tons of softwares online that you can use, and all the papers will have some kind of computational aspect for data analysis. So, looking at what those papers in your field are using will help you create a project around gaps that you've identified. And then creating a poster and creating a research poster and be able to present is the next step of that. And there's tons of resources online for that as well as to how to create a research poster. And then when you're presenting, it's really just about confidence in knowing that you are the person who's done this research and you know it best. And it's definitely intimidating to present to people who have PhDs in these fields and who are doing groundbreaking research in these fields, but you have to know that your research is your research and you've done this, so you know it better than anyone else. And that's the biggest thing I would say is to kind of how to get involved and do research as high school students.
So you mentioned that as a high schooler, you probably don't have a lot of lab access. And that is a big question for a lot of students. And that is, how do people actually get involved in labs or internships without already having connections?
Mhm.
And how can students find lab positions or internships in research?
Yeah, so this summer, I have a position at the Greenberg Lab at the Fred Hutchinson Cancer Research Center, and I had no like connections with that lab. It's not like I had prior connections. That's where the persistence key comes in. So that just comes from cold emailing. You're gonna find a lab that you're interested in what they're doing. You are aligned with their mission, and really, it's just sending a cold email. Hey, this is who I am. This is the experience that I have in this field, and it might not be related to your lab specifically, but this is experience that I have. This is why your lab is really intriguing to me. Do you have any opportunities for me in your lab? And 99% of the time they're going to say no. And you just have to be okay with that. I think last year my friend sent out 200 emails to various labs across University of Washington, Fred Hutchinson Cancer Research Center, a few of the UCs like UCLA and UC Berkeley, and he got 4 responses out of 200. So you have to understand that your volume it's a numbers game. It's just you're trying to find that one lab that is going to take a high school student. And that's where that persistence comes in. If you see, oh, I've gotten 30 rejections, this isn't working, that's not how it works. Like you're probably not going to see results after 30 rejections or 30 emails. You need to go and hit 100 to 200 labs, and that's when you're going to be seeing real results. So I think the biggest reason students don't get these opportunities is because they stop after the first 30 to 50, and that's where that they fall short. And that's exactly where persistence comes in. You need to be okay with continuing on and working to get those positions. So that's kind of just the structure of a cold email. But beyond the structure, most of these labs aren't like really reading your email. It's kind of just like, does this person seem passionate? And then if they are interested in having a high school student, they'll probably offer you an interview afterwards. And that's where you'll probably be presenting more about yourself and where they'll care about you more rather than what you wrote in the email. The email is kind of just a starting point to get off of, but the biggest thing that's the key here is volume.
I know you talked about presenting at research conferences, and once students get into research, their next question is usually how far they can take their research. So, how do you find conferences to present at, and what does that process look like?
Yeah, so I think the biggest thing is ask your peers and people older than you where they've presented, because if they've presented at a conference that accepts high school students, then you can apply to that conference as well. The biggest thing is to use the people around you and see what they're doing, because those people who are like seniors, juniors in high school, they've probably already done these things, and those are the people you want to go to and ask, hey, what conferences have you presented at? Have you presented at conferences? And then you find out what conferences they presented at, and that's where you go apply, because that's you already kind of know that background of, oh, they'll accept high school research. And then another thing you want to look for is high school like young scholar symposiums for undergrad researchers, because most research conferences are focused on the graduate level and postdoctorate level, but there are some that accept undergraduate research. And if you have research as a high school student, you can apply to undergraduate conferences as well. They're generally, unless it's specific in the eligibility criteria that you can't, you can still apply to undergraduate symposiums. For example, my conference is going to be happening in Minneapolis. It was it said specifically undergraduates and high school students, which is awesome. But again, remember that undergraduate research and high school research can overlap sometimes. So if you have really great high school research, then you can apply to a lot of undergraduate symposiums, and there's a chance you'll get accepted. And again, you're generally submitting your abstract, which is just a 250 to 500 word summary of your research, or a paper to these conferences. And the nice thing is that your abstract or your paper will get published in the conference proceedings afterwards, which is a great opportunity as well. And remember that conferences are so much more than just presenting and publishing. You make so many networking connections when you're at these conferences. At the American Association Cancer Research Conference in April, I met over 200 people, definitely, that I just talked to a lot, and they were in my field and I could relate to them. So speaker sessions, exhibits, networking, these are huge opportunities that are at conferences that you should take advantage of while you're there. and think about it as more than just presenting your research.
Within going to our next topic of HOSA, within HOSA, there's a big difference between just participating in HOSA and competing at a high national level. And what
Mhm.
would you say makes a HOSA competitor high level compared to an average one?
Yeah, so the biggest thing is that HOSA competitors who are competing at the high level, they started early. Like your school might introduce HOSA in like October, and they're like, oh, pick your events in October, and then you'll start kind of working on it in November, December. But the high level competitors, all of the themes, all of the prompts, all of the event guidelines come out in July. And they come out July to September. So if you're working during the summer on your events, you're already so far ahead of everyone else that is kind of what's going to differentiate you. You had so much more time to work on everything. But the other big thing is the rubric. Pick apart the rubric, draw all over it, understand, connect each part of what you're building to the rubric. Um, a lot of people kind of see the rubric as just something to glance at once they're done and to just kind of compare like, oh, I think I hit these points. But if you're truly basing what you're doing off of the rubric, and you're saying, okay, this box, I'm building this portion based off of this point here, that is where you're going to you want to make it easy for the judges to give you points. You want to make it easy for them to tick off the box and say, oh, this person hit that point. I can obviously see it. You never want to leave them like, oh, I'm not sure whether or not they got this point. So pick apart the rubric early is the biggest thing. Don't just use it once you're done. Use it at the start to base your project off of. And that's kind of the biggest thing I would say is what differentiates kind of the high level competitors from the average ones. The other thing is your presentation. Obviously, there are multiple different events in HOSA. There are testing events, there are speeches, there are presentations, there are posters, there's skill events. There's so many different things. So you also want to pick an event that aligns with your strengths. If you know you are not the most confident speaker, obviously if you want to build presentation skills, go ahead and do a presentation event, but also understand that and say, okay, maybe I should also select a testing event where I know I might have more success. Pick stuff that is aligned with kind of your person. Personally, I'm a huge speaker. I like speaking, and so I go for events that have in-person presentations and where I can connect with the judge. And I don't really do testing events. So pick something that's going to align with your personality. The other thing is seeking mentorship from people who've done it before. A big thing in HOSA is that you don't really know what the judges want. And you're just kind of going off the rubric and trying to kind of guess to how to make your presentation. Talk to the people who've done it before. There are always people out there who've done things better than you, who have done things before you. So seek out these people because they're who are going to help you get to that next level with your presentation, get feedback on your presentation, get feedback on your study skills or your skill events. Just do everything you can to prepare as early as possible and use the resources that you have.
So, kind of more about a misconception maybe about HOSA. A lot of students think that HOSA is only for people who want to become doctors, but it actually connects them to a much wider range of healthcare
Mhm.
careers. So, what career interests connect to HOSA other than just being a doctor?
Yeah, so I think the biggest thing about HOSA is that you can develop so many different skills within that. Obviously, like if you're doing a speech and a presentation, you're gaining so many skills in confidence, public speaking, connecting with someone, engaging an audience that will be relevant to you, whether you go into the medical field or whether you're going somewhere else, like you're going to go into law. Those skills you build in confidence will help you in those fields as well. So it definitely connects to other career interests, even if it is as an organization focused towards that. Also, there's so many more things than just being a doctor, whether it's an EMT, a CRNA, phlebotomist, and then also different specialties. HOSA is for health science professions and not just, physicians and nurses. Also, a huge thing is that misinterpretation, I guess, is that it's a doctor is kind of like the pinnacle of that, but there are so many sides in research. Being a principal investigator in a lab, being a research scientist in a lab, becoming like the president of like research organizations. These are really great positions where you can do a lot of great things for research as a whole. And HOSA has different things in biotechnology, research poster, and it has events that are on that side that will help you learn skills that you need to go into that pathway as well, instead of just the clinical side, the research side as well. So it has so much more than just becoming a doctor. And I think that is a big myth about HOSA as a organization.
Beyond just medical knowledge, you talked about how HOSA builds a lot of skills that could be applicable in other fields, like a lawyer. And so, what is transferable skills does HOSA build?
Yeah, I mentioned a lot of things about confidence, engaging an audience, and public speaking, but the biggest other thing I would say is networking and learning how to speak with individuals that you don't initially know. I think a lot of high school students struggle to talk to adults initially and talk to even like other students. And HOSA provides a really great space at conferences to just meet new people and just a low pressure environment to figure out how do you introduce yourself? How do you talk to other people? How do you get opportunities? And how do you connect with another person who you don't know? So, networking opportunities are a huge thing. And I would say that I hope that I think you see that I'm a very outspoken person and now, but I that's not how I initially was. Going into high school, I would say I was a really shy person initially, and HOSA definitely helped me, HOSA and TSA helped me come out of my shell a lot and be able to talk more confidently and be able to talk to new people. And that's the biggest thing that I would say is that HOSA gives you so many skills in learning how to speak confidently, but also learning how to speak to people confidently, which is, I think, two different things as a whole. Also, the other huge thing is professional development, learning professionalism, resume building, resume writing, interview tips. It can give you a lot of leadership opportunities that can help you develop these professional development skills. And the other thing you want to remember about these CTSOs is that it's so much more than just competition. There are so many things you can do, whether it is starting more chapters, fundraising to help these chapters, or whether it's like learning for advocacy within these organizations. There's so many more things you can do than it's just competition. A lot of people think that, oh, I've placed really high. This is all I can do in these organizations, or I've gotten like a chapter position at my school. But there are so many things that you can do within these organizations that a lot of people don't take advantage of. And I think impacting others beyond just competing is the biggest thing that you should focus on when you're in a CTSO.
So, from everything you've spoken about HOSA, it seems like a very unique and different experience from what students would usually go through in a normal classroom setting. So, my question is, how does HOSA competitions and the experience in general differ from the traditional classroom learning environment?
Yeah, so HOSA, I think, is more real world application, whereas in school, you're learning from slide decks and you're taking tests and you're gaining knowledge in that field, but it's not applicable knowledge yet. You are not learning how do you apply this knowledge in a real world space. And I think HOSA offers that experience, whether you're obviously when you're taking a test, it might be kind of similar to what you find in a classroom, but when you're doing like a skill event, a huge example is cert skills. So cert skills is an event where you personally are learning how to apply real first aid skills, and you're going to go ahead and do those skills in the competition, and that's real world experience. You might learn that in health class, like what that looks like, but you're not applying it yet. and you're not actually understanding, what that looks like in a real situation, the HOSA can really offer that real world experience. And same thing with presentations. At school, you might be learning about something, but to actually build a presentation off of it and figure out how to engage someone with that is a whole other ball game. And that's why CTSOs offer things that schools really can't offer. You're just going to get that real world experience from a CTSO that you will never find in school.
For this next topic of TSA that we were discussing, you talked about how it's another CTSO that tons of students hear about, but not many students actually understand what makes it different from other CTSOs. And beyond like the skills that we've already heard that we should develop for HOSA and we develop through HOSA, what can students do in TSA?
Yeah, so TSA is definitely more technology based. They include more things about STEM education, engineering design, problem solving. So there are more things on that side of engineering versus like medicine, but you can take any like passions from any like field and align them within TSA. So, for example, I competed in an event called Future Technology Teacher where you're developing an educational lesson plan and you're giving a presentation on this. But that is an event where you can pick any topic you want. And personally, I went into vaccines and vaccine education. So you can take any event and spin it to how you want to spin it and pick something that will be aligned to what you're interested in, which is why I think TSA is really great. HOSA definitely is a more rigid structure in that. There's definitely some events where you can kind of pick anything you want and do what you want with it. But TSA has a little bit more freedom in being able to say, like, exactly, not precisely what you want to do, but pick events that will allow you to do something that you're more intrinsically interested in than what the event is focused on. So that's why I would say you should know about TSA and what you should know about HOSA in that you can kind of pick any stance that you want and go from there and build any skills that you want to build. So, but that's just kind of a little bit how it's different from HOSA.
So some TSA events are very unexpected and different from what people usually imagine STEM competitions to be and to have. So what's a fun or surprising TSA event that people may not expect?
Yeah, this is a really interesting event to me. Technology problem solving is it's kind of like an improv engineering challenge. You'll be given a challenge. You have 2 hours to fulfill that challenge requirements. It's like who builds the tallest tower with this criteria, whose structure can hold the most weight. It's really interesting and it's great for people that have that robotics engineering and problem solving background. And again, I think you want to also understand that problem solving does apply to healthcare a lot, whether you're trying to figure out a diagnosis, whether you're trying to understand what exactly is going on. Problem solving is a huge applicable thing. And that's why I really am passionate about this event. And it's just a really kind of out of the box event. You don't really have any preparation for it. You just kind of go in and you're doing it. So I really love this event. And I think it's kind of like surprising to people that this is an event at all. And I think it's very like cool as an event. I think TSA you'll find compared to HOSA, there's a lot more improvisational events. For example, extemporaneous speech. It's an event where you'll be given a topic and you have 15 minutes to come up with a speech and give a 5 minute speech on it, which is so much. Those skills are so on the spot that I think TSA is very interesting in that you're able to develop those skills and on demand skills compared to HOSA, which is more preparation and more structured in the event. So I think that's one thing that's a little bit surprising about TSA events and something you could find interesting from them.
Beyond competing, TSA opens up opportunities in leadership and impacting others. And what can students do in TSA beyond just competing? Is it similar to HOSA and like their networking opportunities?
Yeah, this is very similar to HOSA, and I want to touch on both these organizations. The biggest thing is that once you like had the competition aspect and you've kind of done that, you want to go beyond that. Look at opening opportunities for others. I mentioned networking with HOSA, which is also very relevant with TSA. But another big thing with both these organizations is fundraising, for example, to help lower income schools attend conferences. That's a great idea. Opening chapters in areas that don't really have that yet and opening those opportunities for students. Another thing is applying for your local chapter office, so in your school, but then you can also apply for state office. TSA has state officers as well as HOSA has state officers. So that's kind of like the next step. And I think the biggest thing I hope that you all recognize is that the beauty of CTSOs does not lie in competitive events. There are 40 to 60 competitive events, and they'll have winners across all of them. That's not where the beauty lies. It's what you can do beyond that and what these organizations can give you beyond competition. So, and what opportunities you can give to others beyond competition. So, that's what I would say is just really important for everyone to recognize.
So now I think we can move more onto cold calling and communication skills. Cold calling and outreach are the things that most students avoid at first because it does feel intimidating and uncertain. And I think you've mentioned this before. So, what's the first thing that comes to your mind when you hear cold calling?
Yeah, so cold calling to me is just you are reaching out for an opportunity that you may not yet be qualified for, or you might not yet have the skills to exactly accomplish, or maybe you do have the skills, but kind of just reaching out and just putting yourself out there is what cold calling is to me. And I think the biggest thing that's applicable here is when you're cold calling for medical volunteering and shadowing and lab positions and lab internships, or even if you're not in that sector, like as like a humanities student, like cold emailing for internships at like a law firm or another humanities organization. So there's certainly opportunities out here despite in like the pre-med path. So the biggest thing again with cold calling is like rejection and persistence. These are the two words that you should always have within you. You're going to get rejected and you have to keep going. I've mentioned this before. The summer before my freshman year, I'm very young on the age spectrum, so I'm actually not 16 yet, despite being a sophomore. So a huge thing is that I didn't have those opportunities. A lot of people will restrict in organizations, they'll restrict, okay, I can't, we're not really going to accept anyone below 16 because there's a lot of like legal policies on that. So you as like when I was like a 14-year-old person, I really was like, I really want clinical experience, but these people like in organizations are not willing to give it to me. So I need to go out and find someone who is willing to give that experience to me. And so I think that summer before freshman year, I spent like I cold called at least 40 different clinics before I was able to find one position that accepted me. So persistence is 100% the defining quality. I am gonna just name an experience with a friend. That friend cold called like 10 clinics and they didn't get a position yet. And so they were like, okay, let me just wait until I'm 16 or until I'm a little bit older because clearly I'm not going to get anything right now. But that's not the mentality you should have. The mentality you should have is that there's always someone willing to give you that position. You just have to find that person, and it takes a little bit of effort to find that person. So, yeah, that's kind of everything that comes to mind.
A lot of students, when they're cold calling slash emailing, struggle with sounding unprofessional as they try to reach out to people and they don't exactly know how to phrase their cold calling. What is the biggest thing that students do that makes their outreach sound unprofessional, and how can they fix that?
Yeah, so the biggest thing, I mentioned that sometimes you're not gonna have experience when you're cold calling. For example, like as a freshman, I did not have any clinical experience, like literally zero. I did not know anything. So to obviously when I'm cold calling a pediatric clinic or a family medicine clinic, I am not going to be saying I don't have any experience. I'm kind of just learning. I hope you guys accept me. You never want to market yourself down you always want to market yourself up. So, for example, to say, hey, I'm very passionate about the medical field. I'm super interested in understanding if this is a field for me and understanding the work that you do. Would you have an opportunity for me to shadow you, or would you have an opportunity to volunteer at your clinic? Is the biggest thing. You have to market yourself up in being someone who's interested in what they're doing and that you have something to offer to them. So, for example, when you're going in like a lab side or when you're going for like research, when you're cold emailing, you're always going to start with, hey, I read your latest publication. These are some things that I gleaned from it. Here's how my work is related to your work, and here's how I hope I can contribute. So you want to say specific ways you can contribute to their lab, whether that is computational analysis, data analysis, whether that is helping them run basic assays, and like different things. You have to position yourself as someone, as a young researcher who's looking to build on existing work, not just a student who doesn't really have anything to offer. You are always trying to market yourself when you are approaching large organizations like this. And another huge tip I would say with cold calling for medical volunteering and medical shadowing and clinical experience, don't look towards huge hospital systems like UW Harborview, Virginia Mason Medical Center, Swedish. These are all huge hospital systems that have official applications and everything for their volunteers coming in, and they're all vetted. Those people will typically reject everyone who is 16 and under. You can't apply if you're 16 and under. So go to smaller pediatric clinics. Pediatric clinics specifically are typically like smaller, and also family medicine clinics that are individual, like private clinics. Those will not have strict regulations as to who can volunteer and who can help out. And you're probably going to get a better experience as well, because that whoever the doctor or provider is there is going to be able to work on you closer, because typically those small clinics have under 8 to 10 employees in total. So you're going to get a much closer experience, and you're going to learn so much more than if you are in that large hospital system. Another thing that I find is that in large hospital system, you will most likely be doing like work such as, greeting patients, bringing food to them, working at the front desk, which are very important and they do help the clinical system, but you are not really gaining a lot of clinical experience from that experience. So in a private clinic, you are so much closer to the process that you are understanding a lot more. For example, in the clinic I am right now, I run urine samples, I am able to run blood samples. I help out with EKG. So there's a lot more that you can do in small clinics. And that's kind of what I would say, is that you should look towards those areas, even though they might seem like, oh, this isn't as great of an opportunity because this is a smaller clinic. You will probably gain more experience there than you will gain anywhere else. So that's the biggest thing I would say about that. And then, yeah, for outreach signing on professional, you want to make sure you are marketing yourself up always.
More about like marketing yourself. Once students actually decide to reach out, the way that they introduce themselves to others matters a lot. What is one sentence or approach that you would use to confidently introduce yourself to someone new?
Yeah, so first of all, start with who you are, where you go to school, because that's a big thing. And then you're leading forward with your experience and your passion. So, hi everyone, my name is Akshara Guddeti. I'm a sophomore at Eastlake High School. I'm super interested in immunology and oncology, and I worked on mRNA immunotherapy research with triple negative breast cancer, and I'm very interested in learning more. That's just a very simple line where you are leading with who you are and your experience, your passion, and then another thing you can add is how it relates to your work, or say your work is very intriguing to me because of XXX, and this is how it relates to my work because of XXX. Always think about how you are a young researcher or you are a young person within this, but you don't ever mark yourself as having less experience. Can you go out, please? How? Can you go out, please? Um, And you don't ever want to market yourself down, as I mentioned, saying, don't ever say, I may have less experience, but I have a lot of work ethic and passion. You always want to talk about how you have done the best you can to gain experience in this field. And then you're reaching out. So this is another thing I would say, that if you are just getting into research, maybe don't reach out to a lab and try and get involved, because you probably won't understand the work that they're doing, and you probably won't be able to contribute to the work that they're doing. Build yourself first and do independent work and do independent computational work first, so you can build the skills to eventually contribute to their lab. So that's the biggest thing I would say. Primarily gain experience, but never market yourself as having less experience. And yeah, as I mentioned initially, that is the initial sentence or approach I'd go with to confidently introduce myself.
Thank you so much, Akshara. Right now, Rasika and I are done with the questions that we were just curious about, and we'll be moving on to some of the questions that the audience wanted to ask you. And the first one is going back to HOSA, and it's what's the time commitment needed to do well in HOSA?
Mhm. Yeah, so I would say even it's very low commitment, honestly. Like HOSA as a thing is like you have so much time to prepare that if you're just consistently putting in 3 hours a week, like for a long time, you will do well. If you put in the things that I said, and like going to the rubric and getting mentorship and getting feedback and just 3 hours a week, you will do well in the long run. It's not something where you have to contribute 10 hours a week to it, and that's the only way that you're going to do well. There's definitely more about consistency versus time in HOSA. So yeah, about 3 hours a week. And then again, like obviously as you're getting closer to competition, it might increase, 5, 6 hours a week as you're kind of preparing for everything. But initially, like through almost January, it will just be 2 to 3 hours a week initially to do well.
So the next question is more about specific events in HOSA.
Mhm.
Do you know the time commitment? Oh, sorry, that was already asked. How do I prepare for events like medical terminology?
Okay, yeah. So medical terminology is a huge event for testing. So it's a really huge testing event. I see a ton of people competing in it. A lot of my middle schoolers have competed in it. And I think when you say events like medical terminology, you're kind of referring to testing events as a whole. I will say I don't have as much experience with testing events. It's not something that I do, but it is a component of one of the events I do. So with testing, the biggest thing is to understand what types of questions will come out. Personally, in my test for healthy living, it's very focused on mental health, nutrition, biology behind nutrition, biology and chemistry behind nutrition, and different diets, and kind of how that is all relevant to the human body. And it's super numbers focused, and it's an objective test. So for that, it's like, oh, what percentage of glucose is absorbed by the brain? It'll be very objective, and it will not be something that's concept based. It'll be something that is just like numbers focused or like categorized data. And that's just something where you are just going to have to put the time in to kind of memorize these different statistics. And I think the biggest thing that can help you do well in these tests is to understand what type of test it is. I find medical terminology is also one of these tests. It's where you are just flat trying to know everything about these things. I've heard personally from medical terminology that using root words can help you a lot because they can help refer to different things within the root. But yeah, just trying to figure out what type of test it is. I know there's some tests that are more concept based and where you're trying to actually explain what's going on. And in those tests, again, you want to practice like getting test questions. This is something I do. I get AI and like ChatGPT to give me test questions because Host is kind of bad about giving you test questions. They only give you 3 practice ones. So going with AI and ChatGPT, giving it, oh, these are the 3 example questions. Can you generate more questions based on these resources? Can you generate a practice test for me? To help me out with this is kind of the biggest thing that I did to prepare. And also as you're going through textbooks and the materials, creating Quizlets as you go along, because based on like what you think is going to come out on the test, or it's like, oh, I think that this might be a testable question, or AI has told me this could be a testable question. Let me make sure it's on my Quizlet. Or just thinking about what's going to be on the test or what type of test it is, I think can help you a lot. But again, I don't have huge expertise with this as well.
The next question is about TSA. So, is TSA more engineering heavy, coding heavy, or design heavy in practice?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. I would say it's all three. There are like 40 or 60 events in TSA, ranging from engineering to design to promotional design to coding, software development to concept art to biotechnology design. It's such a wide spectrum of events that honestly, it is you can find anything you want, engineering, coding, or design in TSA as an organization. So honestly, I would just say in practice, really it is all three.
The next question probably refers back to cold calling and emailing, and it asks, how can one volunteer at a family clinic as you're doing?
Yeah, as I mentioned, looking for really small clinics that probably won't have strict guidelines as to who can be in there, is probably going to be your best bet. And kind of as I mentioned, marketing yourself as someone who is very interested in the field and yeah, who's very passionate about the field will be the best thing to help you get into it. And again, as I mentioned, it's a numbers game. It's just finding as many places as you can that you're interested in and just doing as many things as you can. And again, a lot of this should be student driven. It should be the student who is kind of going ahead and taking the initiative to put the work in and get these positions. And so if it ends up not being student driven, it could also um impact the student negatively in that I think that if you're not passionate, that it's going to be very hard to get these positions because you have to be passionate in what you're doing to find these positions. So find something you're passionate in to kind of bring forward because you probably aren't going to find as much success with something you're not passionate about.
Looking back, what moments are you most proud of that had nothing to do with winning at HOSA or TSA?
That had nothing to do with winning. I would say it's connections. When you're able to meet someone new and you're able to just learn a lot about them and find things that you have in common, it is so it's such a rewarding feeling to kind of just meet someone and after every single one of these interactions I just feel like wow, like I'm so glad I got to meet this person and learn about their perspective on XXX, and that is such a rewarding feeling, and that is more rewarding than anything you're going to find in competition, and I think you that is one thing you should 100% take away.
That was our last audience question. So if anybody else has anything, you can drop it in and then we can answer it. Yeah, if not, then that we can wrap up the session here. And I want to say thank you so much to Akshara for being our guest speaker today. She did really great. And I want to say just a quick summary of the key topics. HOSA, it's really important to not just treat it as a competition, but also treat it as a networking opportunity. And that's the same with TSA. And for research, it's especially important to be persistent with your cold calling and emailing. And you can be going through hundreds of labs, and you may only be expecting a couple of responses. And it's just so important to be persistent. So thank you so much for again for being our guest speaker, and thank you so much for the audience for joining.
Yeah, I think there was one more question. How do we find reputable labs to cold call and email? So finding labs, I would say, is just one of the biggest things is just going on a website and kind of understanding what it is that they do. So if you're just going into a web into just like for example Fred Hutch or University of Washington, type in keywords about stuff that you're interested in, and then you're going to just kind of go through all the labs, read through everything that they're doing, and that's kind of the only way to find a reputable lab. It's not just kind of hearing about it, you do have to go in and search for it. So yeah, that's what I would say about that question.
Thank you so much, Akshara, for answering all of our questions.
Yeah, of course.